Hey friend, welcome. I'm so excited to have you here listening to another episode of the Pattern Design Circle podcast. Here we talk all about the ins and outs of designing knit and crochet patterns and running a business that makes it all possible. I'm Jessica, your host, knitting pattern designer, design mentor, and the friend in your ear. Can't wait to dive right in. The Pattern Design Circle podcast is sponsored by the Pattern Design Circle, a membership community for knit and crochet pattern designers that are feeling lost, lonely, or frustrated in their business. It connects you with a supportive community that's always eager to answer your questions and help you through the hard times. And there's loads of resources and activities specifically catered to business and designing. Sound like your jam? Check it out at snickerdoodleknits.com/design-circle. That's snickerdoodle, like the cookie, knits, knits.com/design-circle. All right, let's get into it. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Pattern Design Circle podcast. I am so excited to be here chatting with you with a guest. And today I have Hanna Lisa of Making Stories with me, and so excited about it. Today we're going to be talking about Hanna Lisa's story, but also about paying yourself in our industry, or perhaps rather the difficulty of paying yourself in our industry. So, Hanna Lisa, do you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Absolutely. I was just going to make a joke about not having any alcohol in this thing that was related to the not paying yourself, but we'll get to that later. So yeah. So thank you so much, Jessica, for having me. And welcome to everyone who's watching. I'm Hanna Lisa, the owner and CEO of Making Stories. And we do two things at Making Stories. We run a publishing company that produces this little magazine twice a year. And then we also have an online yarn shop where we sell sustainably sourced yarns. And the business, or I founded the business with my then co-founder 5 years ago. And it's always been rooted in very sort of strong core values. Sustainability is one of them, but also transparency is another one of them. And I feel that this is very much something that in my own journey as a business owner is so essential. Like, I'm just a lot happier running my business when I can be as open and transparent about things that, are going on with the business, and also honestly about things that are not going well. I always find the difficult and very vulnerable discussions are the ones that, I don't know, get me somewhere. So I'm excited about our conversation today because I'm assuming it's going to be a lot about, transparency.
Yes.
Or being transparent about things.
I love that so much because that's also something that's really important to me in my business is showing up authentically and realistically. And a lot of that has to do with transparency. And question for you, do you find that this showing up transparently and authentically, how do you do you feel like you have to find some boundaries? Because sometimes we're going through things and it's like, I don't want to be like super pessimistic. I don't, like we go through hard things and you don't want to just be really negative, but at the same time you want to be open. So how do you navigate?
Yeah. Oh, excellent question. I find that I'm going through, broadly speaking, like phases or maybe waves. Like when I look at the business as a whole, of sort of how transparent I am or I feel comfortable with, or it's most often not even a conscious choice. Like how I would more describe it as like how much transparency I gravitate towards, because there are definitely seasons or like waves in the business where I feel more inclined to be open, but it's not a conscious thing for me. Like it's not okay, I don't want to talk about this. It's more a thing of like, I think subconsciously, like maybe hearing some people saying like, oh, like you should do this marketing approach or that marketing approach, that is maybe a bit less transparent than what I would usually do. And then like trying that out and then realizing after a few months, oh, like this doesn't feel right. And somehow, I don't know, like it doesn't feel like me and it doesn't feel like us. And that's when I usually realize like, okay, that transparency thing is really missing. And that is very much tied also to me as a person. When I first became self-employed, that was at the beginning of 2016, there was one major thing that I wanted from like any business that I would be running, but also my life. And that was not playing a role anymore. And so for me, transparency is very much tied to also me being able to show up as just me. And I'm kind and silly and hilarious and very weird sometimes. And like, I mean, that's me. And I run this business. I have an amazing small team, but a lot of what we're doing is infused by who I am. And that's, I mean, I think that's okay. And I think that's beautiful. But that's also why this transparency thing and how it goes and the boundaries that I set is tied to, yeah, I guess how I'm feeling at the moment.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I have podcast episodes about being authentic and things like that. So we won't go too far down that hole. But I do I think it's so important for ourselves, or it makes things so much easier for ourselves, because when you just show up as yourself, you don't have to try to pretend to be something else. You don't have to try to put on different emotions. You don't have to, like you said, play a different role.
Yeah.
You really get to just be you, which is pretty amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. And I think that is also something that I always say to people who are like maybe thinking about starting a business or in their like, I don't know, like are finding their feet. I mean, the reason why we're doing this is because we love doing it. Like you need to love your business. And if showing up as you, as your authentic you, as your transparent you, if that is an essential part of how you are happy in your business, then you need that. And I don't think everyone is like that. Like I've certainly had my share of people saying like, why do you even share that? And I'm like, well, because I want to. And this is my show. So
I think
I will. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I was just gonna say, like, I will say since so I had a child three years ago, which most people on the internet, no, not most people on the internet know about this, but like the people who follow me and making stories especially, they know about Oren. But I find the transparency journey and setting boundaries had like a very clear like impact, or like the other way around, family had a very clear impact on the transparency and boundary setting, because that was the first time that it wasn't only about me. And my partner and I, we had a very conscious conversation about Oren and what we were comfortable with showing and what we were not. So that is like one area in the transparency boundary setting thing that is, I think, very specific. But other than that, it's me.
Yeah, and I think the amazing thing is that we get to set our own boundaries. Some folks are totally comfortable with sharing everything about their kids online. Some don't want to share anything, and there's no right or wrong. It's a matter of what works best for you and what you prefer as a business owner.
Absolutely.
The other thing I was going to say about the authenticity, I think the reason it's so valuable for our audience and customers is because of the connection level. Like when we do show who we are, you get to know their personality, and that's how we connect with people, quote unquote, in real life. Also online, and that really, it's a huge factor to actually showing up as yourself too.
Yeah, absolutely. I find that this is definitely true. I also think that it makes it slightly harder in some regards, like the band, or it's not even a boundary, but the border between sort of transparency and brand, like how much of the brand making stories is me and how much of the brand making stories is just making stories, that also tends to shift. And I find that, the more me there is in making stories, or the more me there is in our social media presence, the better. Because our customers just connect and relate more, but also the harder it can be when there are negative comments and things that people don't like, because then I have to untangle, is this about making stories or is this about me? Like the other day, I had a comment in a survey that I ran where someone said, we want you to have more of a presence on social media. And I was like, I mean, I think I'm doing a pretty good job, especially with stories, which I very much enjoy. But like, obviously, someone thinks not, and because that, like, the way that we show up on social media, especially on Instagram, is so closely tied to me as a person. There's a little bit of work there for me. Like, I don't want to let that get to me too much, like it's also a brand. It's not just a person.
Yes. Well, and I think it's interesting, especially anytime we talk about feedback for social media, that most of our audience doesn't see most of what we do. So they might not have even seen 75% of what you've put up there. And it might not actually be a reflection of what you are or aren't doing, but rather,
yeah.
That's a whole other side tangent.
Excellent point, though. You're very right. Yeah.
Yes. Okay, so I'd love to hear how you got here running making stories.
Okay. How much time do we have?
Okay, how about like a few minute synopsis?
Yeah. All right. Okay. I'll start with my professional training because I always find it interesting, like, what people did. So I graduated from high school in Germany in 2006. And then I went to university and I studied business administration and economics. Did a bachelor's degree in that, did a master's degree in that. And then I went and worked at a big consulting company, at Boston Consulting Group, one of the big 4 companies in the world. And I loved it. It was my absolute dream job. I interned with them already when I did my bachelor's degree, and I got a job offer, and I was like, yes, this is it. Like, I love it. I'm going to become partner. And then I worked there and I loved it. And then I didn't love it anymore. And it was, it was a bit heartbreaking because I was very good at it. And I just didn't feel it anymore. Like there was just something there where I was like, no, like, and I tried for the better part of a year to figure out what that was. Like there was a lot of traveling attached to the job. So I was like, okay, if I take a project that's closer to my hometown and do less traveling, is that maybe the solution? Or is the solution that I want to work in a different industry and like switch practice groups and things? But nothing worked. And then at the end of that year, I had a wonderful mentor through that time. And he saw me become more miserable and more miserable. And then one day he called me and was like, look, I just had lunch with this person who's going to move to Berlin and like become CEO of this pretty small company in the online space. And I think you guys will work well together, and he's looking for someone to do marketing with him. And so do you maybe want to meet him? And so that's how I ended up then moving on from consulting to an online marketplace platform, 50 people here in Berlin. At that point, pretty established already. Like none of the, like Berlin has a big tech startup scene, or more like e-commerce startup scene, but a big startup scene. And at that point, like that company was not part of that anymore. It had already existed for 7 or 8 years. And so I started working there as the head of the marketing team and really enjoyed it because I loved working with the team. I loved doing strategy, and I love marketing But it quickly became clear that we had to do some restructuring. And so I transitioned from that marketing only role to the chief operating officer role. So I took on two very unrelated things in addition to marketing: product management, software product management, and HR. And so I was like, okay, wearing three hats, which I also very much enjoyed. Like, I really liked working there and figuring out what the different teams needed and how the company needed to work, and really developing the strategy for the next 10, 15 years for that company. What also became clear over my sort of the latter end of my second year working there was that I was very interested in leading a very values-based life. Like, I did a lot of, I don't really like the term inner work. I don't know if I, but I did a lot of reflecting. I was almost 30, and I was like, okay, like, what, like, there's like 40 years of work ahead of me, and I'm not super happy. And why is that? And like, what do I need in my life to be happy? And it all came back to, I want to live my life, including my work, according to what I value. And a big portion of that for me was the transparency and authenticity thing that we talked about initially. And it was also about, for lack of a better term, fairness, especially in the work context. And that led to a lot of discussions with my then boss, with the CEO, because I felt that that company was very much very much in the standard company thing of, like, for example, paying like a high school or like a university graduate developer an insanely high salary. And then I had to fight for a 3,000 euro salary increase for a 10-year job experience marketing manager. And I was like, this is not fair. Like, just because the market says that you need to pay this dude like 100K doesn't mean that we, can't pay that other person 100K either. Like, it was just becoming very clear to me that the path that the company was on was very different from my personal path, and that was making me miserable. And so I decided to leave without a backup plan. I had saved some, is swearing okay? I'm not sure.
Go ahead.
Some fuck you money, some beat money, which is the concept of like just saving up in case you need to leave your job, essentially, which I did. And that was at the end of 2015. And I gave myself a year of just figuring out what I wanted and what I wanted to do with my life. And that was when knitting became like the big part that it still is, and hopefully always will be in my life. I had started knitting again in 2014, but then in 2016 I was like, all right, let's do this. I'm gonna post one picture on Instagram every single day, and most of it will be about knitting, and I'm just gonna knit. And out of that grew Making Stories, and it was a very organic journey and a very fun one as well. Like, I started doing some freelancing for startups, but then quickly transitioned to doing coaching for smaller creative businesses. And out of that grew like a relationship with a yarn dyer based in Spain who approached me. And she said, like, look, I want to do a book, but I don't know anything about the business aspect of it. Do you maybe want to work with me on that? And I said, yes, but neither of us knows anything about design. And I think if we want to do a knitting book, we need someone who knows something about the design. And she was like, yep. And so I suggested a friend of mine who I had gotten to know through Instagram, who was a knitwear designer here in Berlin. And the three of us embarked on creating Woods, which was the first ever book that we published as Making Stories. And I officially incorporated Making Stories in 2017. after our first crowdfunding campaign. And then I'm still amazed when I look at the date. I'm like, this was like 5 years ago, and where we are now is so very different from where we were there. Like starting from my co-founder decided after a few years that business ownership and self-employment just wasn't for her. And then we like very amicably parted ways. I bought her out and became the sole owner. We don't do books anymore. In 2019, we decided to do a magazine instead. And then to selling yarns online, which is sort of the latest or one of the latest exciting new things. And now we are what we are today. And I have no idea where we're going to be in 2 years or 5 years. I'm imagining in like 5 years, we can have this conversation again. And then we're like, oh, I had no idea this was going to happen.
Yes. And that's kind of one of the cool things about being an entrepreneur and running your own business is that you can lean into all of those ebbs and flows and cycles. And I felt like that was already kind of a theme of what we were talking about. It was, even when you were talking about leaning into transparency and stuff, like there's times where you kind of go away and come back. And that's just very natural to be cyclical and to have ebbs and flows. Like we often have so many expectations for ourselves to be this all of the time and do this all of the time. And it's not actually very realistic or sustainable and ends up not being very fun. So I think that's what's really something valuable about being an entrepreneur is that we can lean into those ebbs and flows. We don't have to stick to a very specific path, and then it leads us into so many different places we want to expect.
Absolutely. And I think that's also, if you're thinking about, well, the broader economy, one of the interesting aspects of entrepreneurship, because one of the things that I heard over and over and over again when I started my business was like, oh my God, why are you doing this? Why are you leaving this safe job? And I told everyone, and I still very firmly believe this, I was like, this job is not safe. The entrepreneurship is the safe bet because I'm in charge. And no matter what life or the world throws at us, like I can adapt to it and I can adjust to it. And if I'm in an employed position, I mean, especially in Germany, where we have a really strong, like, social employment network, essentially, like we have public health care and you have pension funds and all sorts kind of things that you don't have when you start your own business anymore. But also you can be let go like any day. And if I'm looking at everything that's happened in the world over the last 2.5 years, I'm very glad that, as much as I think it's been overused, we were able to pivot here and there and like do things differently when they needed to be done differently and not stuck in like a job at the mercy of someone else.
Yes. Okay, so this now leads us to where you are today. And I think it was about a month ago, you shared in an email really leaning into this transparency of making stories is 5 years old. And there's a lot that's happened. There's, a lot of amazing things that have happened. But you also shared something very vulnerable. Do you want to talk about it?
I shared that I'm not able to pay myself. And that was very hard. It was very, very, oh my God, there were like so many layers to this. I'm like, where should I even start? Okay. So, the basic facts are that I went on maternity leave 3 years ago. And when I came back, I never started paying myself again. And then at some point, we were in a position as a business that I also couldn't pay myself anymore, because I was just going from cash flow management to cash flow management to cash flow management, month after month after month. And I think the reason for that was not necessarily that I'm a crappy business owner. I like to believe I'm not. But more that we added on an entirely new line with selling yarns that also requires a substantial investment. Like, you have to buy the product before you sell it, at least most of the time. And as much as it pains me to admit this, because I like to think of myself as a numbers person, but I just didn't have my numbers right. Like, I just didn't have, it's ironic, the transparency of what was actually going on in my business to realize what was going on in my business. And that was bad. It was just really bad. And I sort of discovered this or uncovered this when I started working with a fantastic business coach about a year ago. And we started peeling back those layers of like, okay, what is going on financially? What is going on with the margins? Why is it like that? And stuff, until we got to a point where I realized that not only was it so that I was managing sort of cash flow month to month, but it was also so that there was no solid plan in place how I could ever make the money that I needed to make money in order to contribute to our household. And up until summer this year, I was in an incredibly privileged position where my husband brought home the money, and he gave me the space and the time and like the freedom to not have to earn any money to build this business, which is, I think, something that made talking about it even harder, because I always thought I'm this like empowered feminist and stuff, and then I not have to, but I decided to go public with like, no, there's a guy who's paying the bills. And that, I'm still like, yes. But it is like, this is, I mean, it is what it is. And it was a very privileged situation. I'm still thankful to him for that. Also, he decided to start his own business. So summer this year, I'm like, okay, what are we going to do? Like, obviously I need to bring home more money or any money. And then I had this conversation with my business coach, and she is someone who is amazing, but also I think holds her cards pretty close to her chest. And she looked at me and she was like, have you thought about actually sharing this with people? And I was like, well, if you say that I should think about this, maybe I should think about this. So I did. And then I went on Instagram and sent out that email and shared with people that I'm not able to pay myself. And the response was incredible. I mean, it showed me that it was the right thing to do, because a few things happened. A lot of people reached out and said, like, we can't believe that this is happening. Like, not in like a confrontative way, but it's like, how is this possible that you're running this business that on the surface looks like polished and professional and, you know, we know our stuff. And then there's this. I'm like, yeah, this is exactly the reason why I need to talk about this, because by not talking about this, and that was another part attached to the shame with it, was like, I knew that it was problematic that I wasn't talking about it, because there are so many of us, or not so many of us, that's generalizing, but I think I'm not the only one who was able to do what she was doing because of someone else in the background. I think with the rates that a lot of us are charging for a lot of things, they're only possible because we do not have to earn money. And that's a huge problem, because that means we're creating an entry threshold into this industry for everyone who doesn't have that privilege. And that's incredibly problematic. And I knew that I was contributing to the problem. And it was like, that was like, okay, damn. So I went and talked about it. And I had a massive vulnerability hangover for like 3 days after. I was like feeling really like I didn't want to talk to anyone. But it was also good. Like it was good because I feel like I like, when we were talking initially about, the waves of like transparency, it was like, okay, like I am back on the right path. And it also allowed me to launch a few things and talk about the things in an open and honest way. Like we launched something like the Patreon, we call it the Making Stories Collective. And the sole purpose of that is to create a salary for me. And people get perks, but it's not that I didn't have to sell it as anything else. I could just say, I am worth this money. And if you like this business and if you want us to stick around, you can support us by joining the collective. And it's also allowed me, like talking about this has also allowed me, this is going to sound weird, but to put myself first in the business. I put everyone else first. I mean, my employees, the designers, the yarn companies. And I think there still needs to be a balance. Like I never want to be the person who just cares about themselves, but I didn't care about myself at all in the business. And my coach just kept saying to me, she's like, look, like if there's no Hanna Lisa, there is no Making Stories. Like this is just, and she kept saying that over months and months. At the point it clicked. And I was like, yeah, it's right. And it's also okay if I want to make money with this business. And I'm not talking about like getting rich and buying a yacht money. I'm talking about contributing 50% of our household income. So,
and even if you were talking about getting rich and buying a yacht, we have so many other industries in the world where that is okay.
Yeah. So... And I'm not saying that I don't want to do that in like 5 years. I'm just saying I think going from zero to buying the yacht is a little bit of a stretch. So like feels a bit more manageable to saying 0 to 50% of household income. Maybe a vacation. Maybe a little bit. No.
Yeah, I wanted to put that in there because it is so often that I think especially in our industry as a primarily women-led industry and primarily viewed as a craft hobby rather than business, we have a hard time saying, actually, yeah, it's okay for me to have what I want. Like it's okay. I'm working just as hard or more than if I were in a corporate business structure. And why am I not willing to pay? Like, why do I feel like I can't pay myself? Why is it not okay to charge more than $3 for a knitting pattern? Why, like all of these different things. Yes.
You're so right. And I think what I said, like, I mean, it was like really misleading because it is okay. If you want that yacht, go for that freaking yacht. Like even if you want to be rich, go for being rich. Like there's no reason we should hold ourselves back. And see, like, it's so interesting because the fact that I said that thing, like, like I don't want, like, that's again, me talking myself down. Is the thing of like, okay, maybe I don't feel worth it. What is this?
Yes. And then there's so much for folks who aren't really familiar with the idea of money mindset. There's so many stories that we tie to our money. So like my household already has enough money, so I don't need more money. Or if I have money, people think XYZ of me. And I'll try not to go into coaching mode here, but when you said that, really what it feels like to me is I don't want to make it sound like I'm a greedy person who wants a yacht. Like I don't want people to have that kind of image. So, like try to like humble myself down kind of idea. And we do that all of the time. And so it's so much changing our mindset to be like, oh, actually, it is okay to make money. And that's not just in us as business owners,
Mm-hmm.
especially in our industry. You talked about the way our industry is pricing things, and um,
Yeah,
that's a whole nother can of worms, but I don't mind opening it a little bit.
let's do it.
um, because if we're going to pay ourselves, we have to have the money coming in to pay ourselves. And if we're going to say my effort is valuable and worthy of being paid, we have to price our things at a value that says that. We also have to educate our customers to explain, like, yes, I am putting a lot of work into this. It's we so often downplay the effort that we put into our work as in within our industry, where I'm just a designer, I'm just creating knitting patterns, I'm just doing this for fun, I'm just so many things that are, or I'm just where there's no
Yeah.
just, and doing air quotes for those listening to the audio about it, like where we put a lot of time and energy and so much of ourselves into our work, and there's no reason to be downplaying that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I feel though I'm a little tired of educating people about this.
Yeah.
Like, not about the pricing itself, but I started, let me backtrack a little bit. At the beginning of this year, so at the beginning of 2022, I had a conversation with a really good friend of mine. They're a yarn dyer and small business owner in Canada. And we were talking about money mindsets. And they said to me, look, like you need to change the way that you look or that you think about money. Just because you don't have any means that everyone doesn't have money, right? Like there is money in the market and people want to spend the money. And something about that just hit home so hard. And ever since then, because honestly, up until that point, I was always like trying to put our price point as low as possible, which meant cutting into the margin, which meant I wasn't able to pay myself, right? And when Ash said that to me, it kind of gave me the permission to be okay with charging what the things need to cost. And like that was such a relief. It was such a relief because it allowed me to stop worrying about, like, not that you, like, I obviously needed that permission from someone else. I hope that not everyone is like me, you know, but like it also freed up so much mental space. Now I can be like, okay, this costs what it costs. And yes, it's not going to be affordable for everyone, but
Yeah.
this is the way that this business needs to be. And so I also think that the educating people about what goes into things, that has been going on since 2016, since I started my first business in the knitting world, and it's not gotten anywhere. And I honestly do not think it's going to get anywhere as long as we have major designers charging, well, that's not like they're not charging pennies, but they're charging a tiny amount for their patterns compared to the work that goes in there. Why does that work for them? Because they have the scale, they make the money through the volume. But the problem is that by having those incredibly popular designers be present in the market with a low price point and introductory discounts, everyone else has to explain to their customers why their patterns are not only better, but also worth paying more. Because I think those are two different things. Like you're looking at this and you're like, okay, why should I knit this from this unknown designer where there is person XYZ who just put like that thing out and I know that they're like awesome, or like everyone thinks they're awesome. Yeah. And this educating thing of like, okay, let's unpack what goes into a knitting pattern, from grading through tech editing, through test knitting, through layout, through photography, through everything. it just also takes away from our time to actually do work
Mm-hmm.
and market the work.
Yeah.
So I don't know, like this is a pretty recent, sorry, I would like to stream of consciousness thing, but this is like a pretty recent thing that I started to think about of like, do we actually always need to educate people why things are costing money? Like the people who have the money, they maybe do not need to be educated. Does that make sense? I don't
Yeah,
think
it makes
I
sense.
haven't gotten to where like my conclusion on this yet. Like not in this podcast, like generally in life.
Yeah.
But yeah, I feel there's just something there.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I'll say for the listeners and viewers here, probably pretty much everything from here on is basically going to be Hannah, Lisa, and I discussing this, not saying this is the way things should be, or like it's really a
Yeah.
discussion of opening the conversation and talking about ideas. So with that said, um uh so first thing, backtracking about people have money. The example that really showed that to me, because that was definitely something that I heard over and over and over from people who are like, no, I can't raise my pattern prices. It's too expensive. People can't afford it. Um, then I saw plenty of consumers purchasing yarn at 25, 30, $35 a skein and buying 10 skeins at a time, but they can't pay $5
Yes.
for a pet.
Yes.
So that's
Yes.
that's like my proof there. And no, of course not everybody is doing that. I for the longest time, I mean, I still kind of have a hard time paying for the quality yarn. But I do it now. But I used to only shop the clearance racks at Michael's and wouldn't pay more than $3 for a ball of yarn. That those things do exist. That's how economies work. That's like there,
Yes.
there's a price range. And I do believe that we can increase our prices and still have ways to accommodate lower um, budgets. Those can also exist in the same
Yeah.
room. But okay, so now actually going to your conversation about educating, that's really interesting. I do think that a little bit of education, so I guess maybe just coming from my background, I, just was called totally indie, learned how to knit, learned how to buy patterns, bought free, only used free patterns for the longest time. That little bit of education piece was really important. I think for me, well, okay, so I grew up in poverty. I'm used to trying to purchase the absolute cheapest thing I possibly can. So then I've had to be taught like, okay, this piece of clothing costs more because somebody's being paid to make it, or because they're using quality fabrics or
Yeah.
whatever. And so then also with patterns, it's like, this is why, like, there's actually a lot of work going into this. This is why a pattern costs money. Or so that I think that baseline education is important for, I mean, charging anything for a product. But then
Yeah.
I do also agree that we already have so much on our plate. We don't need to spend half of our time. It's not fair to spend half of our time educating
I think,
and making it an emphasis.
yeah. And like just having this conversation with you, I think I'm realizing that what doesn't feel fair to me is not the education part itself, because I actually don't mind that. I actually enjoy talking to people and I enjoy this. Like I was thinking back about a few questions that we had when we first launched the collective that I mentioned earlier, where people asked like, hey, can you have a tier between the lowest and the medium tier where we get access to the behind the scenes content? So like the lowest tier is like $5 and the medium tier is $15. And with the $15, you get access to behind the scenes content. And people were asking like, okay, can we get that for like a lower price point? I was like, no, because it actually takes me a lot of time to create this content. And so the price point was a conscious decision. And realizing that this conversation and also the other like educating conversations, I actually enjoy them. What doesn't feel right to me is that like the people like is that no one of the big ones is doing it, I think, to be blunt about it. I think because the same amount of work also goes into their patterns. And I think over the last years, like we've just raised the industry standard and like raised it again and raised it again to the professionalism of our patterns and like the quality of our patterns. And I think that like this is true for almost everyone in the knitting design world. And I think then also the work of talking about all of this should be sort of equally distributed on the shoulders. Does that make sense?
It
Like it's just it kind of sometimes feels like not even treading water, but you're going against the stream kind of thing where you're like very hard trying to push something through that is so against what everyone else is doing that it's just really hard. And I'm starting to question whether, I mean, I think it is possible, as you said, like with yarns, that's like, I mean, if we need proof, that's proof. Yeah. So yes. But like, is it really actually possible for us to like to get higher pattern prices or the pattern prices that we need without any additional differentiating factor if we're not all doing that? Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
It totally makes sense. I do know there are a few people who sell their patterns at higher prices.
Yeah.
And, say $12, $15, $25 being like for a garment. And they sell patterns. They're not our top of the industry designers. But maybe something else I'll offer here is it's really easy for us, quote unquote, at the bottom designers, meaning not popular, to cast a lot of blame on the higher designers or the popular designers, more well-known designers, and say, you should be charging more so I can charge more. You should but thinking about if I were in that position, I would also be fearful. What if I doubled my pattern prices? I have this income now I've been relying on. I imagine it's really the exact same fears and money mindset beliefs and all of those kinds of things that they're experiencing as well. And part of that also, I guess, what makes me think of that is because magazines, books, things like that, it feels like that also downplays the worth of patterns because you receive so many patterns in a book for cheaper. And so, well, even in starting in Tandem, which is knit and crochet magazine thing that I started earlier this year as a collaboration with other folks. But as we were talking about that, it's like, okay, these other magazines, Making Stories, Pom Pom, Lina, all these that we kind of viewed as the higher tier, publications, it's like, well, they're able to do this because of scale, which is the exact same argument for our upper designers, our more popular designers. But just the fact that I'm having this conversation with you, Hanna Lisa, as the owner of Making Stories, it could be really interesting to have these kinds of conversations with the upper designers to know what their numbers actually look like. but also, I don't know. It's just, there's
No, I think
so many parts to it.
yeah. Well, I think you're right. I think that well, if I think about us, like I mean, I know our circulation numbers and we're like Lina is 10 times bigger than we are.
Mhm.
Like just to put that out there as like a reference frame, right? And I know like if I'm looking at who I'm not one to compare, but like obviously if I go into a yarn shop and I look at, like they stock us and who else do they stock? They stock Lina and they stock Pom Pom. Both of whom are absolutely lovely and wonderful. And I very firmly believe we can all coexist. It's just that I think of like, I know that we are still a lot smaller than they are, which again creates the problem. If I have a print edition that's 10 times smaller than another magazine, our price points are very similar. The size of the magazine is very similar. The only other difference is that we don't run ads until now. And so that means if we're talking about unit economics, so how much does it cost me to produce one magazine and how much margin do I have with one magazine? My cost is going to be per definition a lot higher than theirs because printing costs per copy go down the more you order. So I think that in itself is an interesting sort of comparison to what we said earlier about like, like the maybe designers who aren't as popular yet and the really popular designers, because I think you're completely right. Obviously, they're also in like the money mindset thing and the money, like, oh my God, what is going to happen if I raise my prices by 20%? How many people am I going to lose? And maybe I'm the sole income provider for my family and I can't afford to lose that. I just think that there are ways that, and I'll talk a little bit more about the magazines in a second. I don't want to avoid like that line of thinking or conversation. Like, I just think that like there's a lot of work that you can do outside of raising your pattern prices if that is not something that you're comfortable with, that you can do to support other designers and upcoming designers. So like talking about the work that goes into creating a pattern, like making that a little bit more visible, all of those things. I think for magazines, I mean, if you're thinking like, I mean, our magazine is like $26.90 and it has 12 patterns in it. So it's like $2 and a little bit per pattern. You break it down to a pattern price, that's next to nothing. And it creates, I think in the publishing side of the knitting industry, we have a problem with compensation that no one has been able to fix yet with designer compensation. Most of the folks involved in the creation of a magazine will be paid by the hour. Tech editors, layout, photographer, not the designers. And if you do the math, and like I know that the rates that we're paying, they're in industry standards is such a bullshit word. But like
Typical.
Like they're typical. Yeah, they are typical. I mean, like usually, I don't know how familiar everyone who's listening or watching this is with magazine compensation. Usually what happens is you get a flat fee in exchange for exclusive rights for the magazine for a certain period of months. After that, you get the pattern back and you can sell it individually. Then sometimes publications throw in additional things, like we throw in shipping reimbursement. We also throw in a fully layouted and tech edited and test knitted pattern. So like all quote unquote, all that you have to do as a designer is write the pattern and knit the sample. That's the majority of the work. But test knitting, tech editing, layouting, photography, that's all on us. You also get the photography, the professional pattern photography at the end, so that you have a fully layouted pattern, or you can lay out it yourself in your own branding with our photography if you want to do it, that you can sell. That being said, that flat fee, if you break it down in the hourly rate, like that is literally pennies, right? With the problem being that no knitting magazine would be able to pay their designers per hour, because then we would be 10 times as expensive. It's something that, again, like, is one of those open-ended conversations that I haven't found a solution yet. Like, one of the things that we started doing with our recent issue 8, is we started an affiliate program for everyone who works with us. And I know affiliate programs sound like sleazy and they don't have a really good rep, but I find that you need to call things by the name that they are. And it is an affiliate program, but it comes from a place of like, obviously designers want to talk about their work when a pattern is released in a magazine. And obviously we as a publisher benefit from that exposure. And it's not fair if, we get the sales and you as a designer don't get anything from it. And so that's what we do with that affiliate program is, so I think, sort of coming to the end of that convoluted point, I think there's a way to do variable compensation that makes it fairer for designers to work with a magazine, and that maybe also makes the place of magazines in the knitting world, I don't know, not drive down the prices so much.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know yet.
And then to add another layer of perspective to that, there are many smaller, less popular, I don't know the right word to use, but designers that aren't towards the top, that they make more from the magazine compensation than they would if they were self-publishing. And so then that tells you really how much we're paying ourselves.
Yeah. I like to think, but again, I mean, obviously I'm biased because I'm the publisher. I like to think that it's also valuable for a designer to be published in a magazine because it gets your name in front of more people. And I don't like this whole thing of like, oh, just do this for the exposure, because that's how I ended up not paying myself, right? Like, so, but I think there is value of being published in a magazine that goes beyond the monetary compensation. What I enjoy the most, honestly, is watching designers who have worked with us like a few years ago, like maybe a couple times in a row, who have then become like really, really successful and really popular. I mean, like it just makes me very happy, and it's also nice. Like one of the feedbacks that makes me most happy or like happiest when I get it, like it's not every designer likes working with a publication. That's also just something that happens because you're not working to your own, pattern style guide and things like that. But like I've had quite a few designers reach out after they've worked with us and said that by working with us, their own work, the way that they think about pattern development, the way that they write their patterns has gotten a lot better, which makes me very happy. It is something that I think is also valuable.
Yeah. It's all so interesting. When we talk about this is a huge topic, and it's like we have a million different cubbies that are all related and connected. And so when we talk about paying ourselves and talk about raising prices, it's not like it's an easy just do this and problem solve.
No.
And that's why we are still where we are.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So, do you have any thoughts on where our industry could be heading, or where you would like to see us heading, or thoughts on how we actually compensate ourselves within this industry?
I wish. Oh. No, I mean, I love this industry. Like, otherwise, I wouldn't be doing this business. I really, truly love it. I've met amazing people, some of my closest friends here. And I've also met, like, I mean, amazing fellow business owners like you know, it just makes me truly happy. And I want to believe that we can change it and that we can make it so that everyone can participate, because that would be my wish. Like, no matter whether you're a designer or a yarn company or publisher or a knitter, that there are options for you in the market to not only exist, but to thrive. And that is a very big task because, as you said, like, there are a million different things that contribute to it. Like, thinking about pattern accessibility financially, but also physical accessibility, things like that, you know, like designer compensation we've touched upon. I think what I wish for our industry is for us to have those conversations openly and honestly and more often, so that they become the default and not the, hey, I've launched a new pattern, 20% off is the default that I see on Instagram.
Yes.
Or I want to have these conversations.
More than 20% off. Some designers not necessarily want to launch, but like I'll see some sort of bigger designers that just have flash 50% off all my pattern sales. And it's like,
and you know what? There might be a very good reason for that. Maybe they've had a medical bill come in. Maybe their heating is broken. Maybe, you know, they need to pay for a flight to go visit a sick family member. What I wish for this industry is that people are confident and comfortable enough that we can talk about this. That things like, my partner decided to start their own business, so I need to contribute money. And I know that I've been in a very privileged position before, but now I really need to make money, is like not something extraordinary. And I'm not saying that this is what everyone should do, but like, I think just having that human side and that like little bit more transparency, I think would be good for the industry, because I feel like it is not like, we're not like, no one of us is Amazon, you know, like we're like for the most part just small businesses and run by people. I also think that,
oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. No, you go ahead.
I was gonna say, I would maybe a little caveat to that is, yes, more transparency, more discussion, but at the same time, we shouldn't need to have a crisis happen in order to ask for money.
Yes, absolutely. No, absolutely. That was just the like sort of like very much related to you saying like, hey, you know, there are some people who offer like a flash 50% discount thing. And honestly, like, I've had my fair share of conversations with business owners who've done those flash sales, and in more cases than not, it's because they needed some money really fast, right?
And also, even if they don't need the money really fast, they know that's how you do get money really fast, because that is how we get people to purchase, is through big discounts.
Absolutely.
Because we're used to buying because of a discount.
Yeah. And that is an excellent segue into my other wish for the industry, which is more sustainable work for all of us. Because one of the things, I mean, this is it's a whole different topic area, but I find that the pace of work, the amount of patterns that are put out every single day is so high that it's overwhelming our customers. Like, there's just so much out there. It's
burning out our designers.
Sorry, say again.
Burning out our designers.
Exactly. It's burning out our designers, because you have to churn out patterns, whereas this is not the way that creativity works, right? It also opens the door for marketing tactics that are not sustainable. Like, in order to then get your pattern in front of people, you need to be offering those really high discounts or doing something extra special or having that super crazy reel or something, you know? And that's also not sustainable, because in the end of the day, you know, we have knitters who have spent money. And I think that's maybe also sort of related to why are people spending money on yarn but not on patterns, is because they are buying patterns on impulse, and again and again and again, and then the Revelry library looks like mine with like hundreds of patterns that they're never ever going to knit just because they got because they were on sale. Right. And so what I wish for is that the whole industry moves into like a more relaxed pace of work. Knitters making conscious decisions about, this is the pattern that I want to make. And then, okay, like I'm going to do some research on the yarn that I want to knit it in. And then I'm going to take my time and make that pattern. And then the next one, right? And that also allows designers some breathing space, and they can allow their creativity to come when it comes. And it also, you know, allows everyone else to not run at this frantic pace. I mean, there's a reason why we put out our magazine twice a year, and that's never going to change, because I know that our customers, like we have some incredible customers who are making like 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 out of the patterns between issues. Most of the customers make like maybe 1 or 2, but that's okay. Like that's what I want for people. Like I don't want to have like 12 patterns every 3 months and then it sits on your bookshelf and it doesn't get used. Also not very sustainable.
Yes, yes. And I mean, if we go back to the root of all of this is for the knitters. Well, and crocheters, you know, like we talk about knitters, but we include crocheters in the same conversation. And when we start knitting, it's not for the sake of mass production. Like I've talked about this some too, even for the knitters, the culture that we've kind of started to build up, especially with social media, is like the pressure to make, and as fast as you can so you can show all of your projects and all this stuff. And is that really what you want to be doing when you're knitting? And same as when you're designing, and like what is the actual purpose here? It's not to be producing at super high volumes.
No, I mean, if that's what makes you happy as a knitter, then by all means, go for it. Yes. But I know that from my conversations that I have with customers, they are they're happiest when they take their time selecting what they want to make and being mindful about things. And I also think if I'm looking at my own personal journey as a knitter, like, I mean, everyone who's watching this will see the sweater that I'm wearing, which is a sweater from our very first book. That, like, this one I made in 2017. I love it. I still wear it. It fits me well again after the birth of my child. So it's like, and that makes me truly happy. And I think I'm not alone in that. I think, you know, when we're pulling out sweaters that we made years ago and want to wear them again, that's where the magic is. Or even when which is the other thing that I did a lot in the last few months, is I made quite a few sweaters that don't fit me anymore, or that I don't, you know, just don't enjoy wearing. I gifted them. And it just makes me happy seeing them in other hands. And I think, you know, like making conscious choices about what you're knitting is really at the heart of that.
Yes, absolutely. I was going to about wrap this up, but I'm going to take a sharp right turn and go back to designers being able to make money in other ways. So like you created a Patreon type. Can we have just a brief discussion about that and how that feels and your thoughts on it?
Yes, absolutely. Um, I I mean, like we're recording this about a month after we've launched our Patreon thing. I am really liking it so far. And I think it is a really good way for designers um to do two things. That was hard. To do two things at the same time. One is, and that's such a buzzword, but create a community. And two is create a consistent income. Let's talk about the last one first. Consistent income, I find, is one of the things that just gives you a lot of peace of mind. Because our industry is very cyclical. I mean, we're recording this at the end of September. Like our full season has started and it's not going to end until the end of March. So it's like, and then there's summer and like nothing happens in summer. So having that consistent income that you can rely on every single month, I think creates a little bit of room for you, like, okay, I can, pay my tech editor or pay my rent or, whatever you want to do with that money. And also the creating community is, I think, something that has gotten really difficult because Instagram used to be where we were able to create community, but not anymore. Like it's just not, it's changed so much. And I'm not judging whether it's better or worse. It's just changed. But that also means like this community thing of providing things to your people, that's not Instagram anymore because, as you said, like people see like a fraction of the content that you put out there. And so I found that with our Patreon or our collective, as we call it, it's a really nice way to give something back to the people who love our work and want us to continue. That's the way that I look at it. So we have three tiers, as I said, like 5, 15, 45. And with the lowest one, like gets you a thank you. And it's not like, it's for everyone who loves our work and wants to support it. It's the equivalent of a pumpkin spice latte, So, and it's like in the medium bracket or in the medium tier, people get access to exclusive content and also collective exclusive products. And then with the highest tier, we're doing something that is pretty specific to us because we're running a web shop. People get 10% standing discount on everything at any point in time in the web shop. What I found interesting is that there are a few people in that highest tier who just really, really, really love us and want to support us. They don't necessarily want to buy yarn every single month. But it's, I think it's a pretty, I mean, for us, it's a pretty good way to structure it. I think for designers, there are different ways to do this and different ways to structure this. What I will say, when I developed ours, one of the things that I kept coming back to is that I want to have the offer as simple as possible. Like, not like you get these 15 perks, but like be very clear and also very mindful of what can I actually deliver. I used to run a Patreon way back when for my own like small creative business coaching thing. And the problem that I ran into with that Patreon was that I was producing videos exclusively for that Patreon. I think like 2 videos a month, maybe. And I never got the amount of patrons above the threshold that I needed for those videos to actually be sustainable. And I think that's a problem that a lot of Patreons are facing. So I went about this trying to think about realistically, like how long does it take me to create that extra content? How much does that cost? And I think as a designer, you can be, especially if you already have patterns there, you can be like really creative about this. You can say like, hey, you get like a pattern every month from my back catalog, or you get also like a standing discount, or I've even seen some designers say like and I think you can price that pretty high. You just have access to your entire design library for forever, essentially. And if there are other things that you like to do as a designer, you can make them available as well. I don't know if you're familiar with the work of Hunter Hammerson.
A little bit, yeah.
So Hunter did a very radical thing a couple of weeks ago. Hunter stopped selling all of their patterns completely. So they you might have seen their work around as the tiny little things. So like little witch hats and little pumpkins and little potion bottles and little hearts and little stars, all of those things. And then Hunter started again with a Patreon, also because they love going into the really technical aspects of knitting. And that's not something that you can ever get compensated for properly in a pattern, I don't think, even if we were able to raise the prices to $15, $20, $25. If that's your jam as a designer, that's excellent. Like that's definitely something you can put into a Patreon. Okay, I'm gonna stop talking now. You see, I'm no, I'm really quite excited about this because I think yeah, as I said, it's a wonderful way to create a consistent income, and also to make your people happy.
Yes. So at the time of this recording, the adding a stream of income Patreon version with Julie Ann Knitter is actually next week inside of the Design Circle. This episode won't be available until a little bit later. So it will have already been up and available to Design Circle members. And then there will be several more adding a stream of income guest speakers. So I don't have anything against it. I did have a Patreon at one point, but something just recently that's kind of starting to bother me is this idea that, all right, we can't make money doing our actual work. So now we like just see more and more and more people starting a Patreon because that's how you can make money. And that's really frustrating me. And I don't have anything against Patreon. I think there's amazing, wonderful things you can do there. And specifically when, you have a passion that you really want to share and is important to monetize. But just this whole fact that, all right, we can't make money in our actual industry. So now we have to also create something else is the part that's starting to frustrate me.
Well, yes, but... And sorry about that and about running off. There was like, our little one is home and just like burst into the room. My husband running after him. So yes, but I don't think the Patreon needs to be something extra. I think it can be like ours with the behind the scenes content, which is content that I love. I just know is not for everyone. But it can also just be using your existing work or the work that you would be doing anyways and making it available to people in a different way. And that comes to my second but. I would think of Patreon more of an additional sales channel than an additional extra work thing. Why am I saying that? Patreon has the advantage, now we're getting technical here, but it drives down your customer acquisition cost. So your customer acquisition cost is how much you spend. It doesn't necessarily have to be like money into ads, but like just the work that you spend getting one additional person to buy your patterns, right? Now the problem, if you not the problem, but the way that pattern sales work is every time that you release a new pattern, you technically have to have the same customer acquisition cost over and over and over again, right? Because every time you're launching a new product, and so every time you're technically acquiring a new customer, even if they've bought from you before. So let's, with Patreon, because it's a subscription, you only have those customer acquisition costs once, right? So could you do a Patreon that says, okay, support my work, and also with this, you get like a 10% discount on every new pattern. No extra work, but the consistent income stream. And so I think why more people are doing Patreon and why why selling our work is not working anymore is because there are so many patterns out there in the market. And because the platforms that we used to sell on, like Ravelry and Instagram, they're not working anymore. And so maybe Patreon, I don't know yet, but maybe Patreon, maybe Patreon is just a different platform / sales channel, ?
Yeah. Well, and it also is, it's the whole reason memberships in general, annual subscriptions, monthly subscriptions in general are a thing is because of, the recurring revenue and how important and valuable that is. So yeah, I think it really comes down to understanding why you want to start something like that and being really clear on how it aligns with your values and your vision and what you actually love to create. So I had on 3 years ago now. And I was very excited about it, but it was the same thing as kind of what you shared earlier, that I didn't get enough people to really justify all the time I was putting into it. And then when I surveyed my people, they're like, oh yeah, we don't really care about what you're creating. We're just here to support you. And I'm like, how many hours did I put into this? And so it's really, it can be extremely valuable for you and for your customers. It can be really unique and interesting, but be intentional about it.
Absolutely. And be very honest to yourself about how much time you will put into it and into the work that you put out there, because I find that's the pitfall that I was so scared about before creating the collective based on my previous Patreon experience. I will also say, don't be afraid to charge money. I had just 2 interesting sort of observations on this. When I set the Patreon up or the collective up, I had a conversation again with my business coach about it. And I was very firm on, I wanted a tier that doesn't give you anything except like the pitch for that tier is you love what we do. You want us to stick around. You want to support our work. You don't get anything back, period.
And you'll be surprised. I mean, if you've never done something like that before, you can be very surprised by how many people just want to support you.
Exactly. So I would say you don't actually have to always offer something, as you said, like with your own survey, you'll surprise what people want and what they don't want. Also, don't get discouraged by some of the other price points. I've had a few people reach out to me after we launched it and be like, hey, like this is actually above industry standard. I'm like, yeah, because industry standard is too freaking low. It's like,
I'm not kidding myself, remember?
Like, that's the whole point. Go read this webpage. But like, if you're looking at the Patreons of some of the really big designers, this exact same thing that we were talking about earlier with pattern pricing applies to them. They're making the money through the volume, right? Mm-hmm. So don't be afraid. You don't need to, like your people will want to support you, I think.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, one other thought. We'll wrap this up shortly. But going back to the thought earlier about the the folks that are able to make their money because of scale. Um, just a thought that I had. It seems interesting that really our industry, it seems like we've priced things so that when you're at a high scale, that's when you're actually making maybe what you should be making, like an actual reasonable amount of money, and then everybody else falls below that. Rather than in some places, other parts of our life, we see that the baseline is all right, this is what you need to make in order to have a living, and then it goes up from there so that when it's scaled, people are making lots of money.
Yeah.
So just interesting.
Yeah.
Thought.
Yeah. Very.
The thing that happened on this call.
Very good. Very good observation. I mean, if we go into the whys, we're here another 1.5 hours, which I don't mind at all. Maybe just very briefly, I mean, I think it has a lot to do with most of our work is what's traditionally considered women's work. And most of the people who are working in our industry are identifying as female, or have grown up in an environment that saw them as female, and so have been kind of conditioned to all of the things that, you know, we get conditioned to do and be and not ask for as women.
Yes.
So, yeah.
And on top of that, the fact that it's a craft hobby industry, like the people consuming are, it's a hobby slash art. And something I found interesting thinking about is other art industries. We have painters, we have musicians. They all deal with, to some degree, the exact same thing we're talking about on this call.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yes. Do you have any final thoughts you want to share or words of encouragement for folks out there trying to run a business in this industry?
Don't give up. Like, it's hard. It's so hard sometimes, but it's also just so worth it. And if you fall out of love with it, like, you know, there's no shame in letting it go. Absolutely not. But know that, you know, if you're in a hard or like in a rough patch right now, like that's completely normal. Things ebb and flow. I mean, that's the theme of this whole episode, right? Like, so that, I mean, that's okay. If I were to give one piece of advice, it's find your people. And with that, I don't mean your customers. Yes, find those too. But find those people, like the 4, 5, 6 customers. And I mean, if you're watching this, you are in a very good spot to find those, like not customers. I just said customers. Why did I say customers? 4, 5, 6 other fellow business owners, designers, but go branch out beyond the design as well. Like go find yourself a yarn dyer, and you'll be surprised at how much you can learn from them in terms of marketing and money mindset, because they're making money. Some of them are, most of them are. No, like really, go find those people that, you know, you can WhatsApp or call with your business questions, you know, and keep them close. Like that is also, it just takes time. For me, it took years and years, but there are some really amazing folks in this industry. And if you find them, when you find them, keep them close, treasure them.
Absolutely. And I guess I'll put a little plug in here. That's the design circle really is about
yes,
the community aspect. It's specifically with designers, but then all of the amazing guest speakers that I've already featured in there, so many more coming up that are so amazing and inspirational. And that is exactly how Hanna Lisa and I first got connected. Was I had Hanna Lisa inside the design circle as a guest. And I'll add to that I feel like, you know, sometimes it's easy to want to kind of force these connections, to be like, oh, I really want to get to know this person, and to like, and it just doesn't work out for some reason. But then other connections are just like
Yes.
And beautiful and amazing. And I feel like
Absolutely.
My friendship with Hanna Lisa, it's been special.
Likewise.
Yeah. Okay, Hanna Lisa, where can folks find you online?
So you can find us at making-stories.com. Almost the same thing on Instagram _making stories. We also have a YouTube channel, so you can just search for Making Stories on YouTube. There's an episode every other week that's mostly really knitting. So those are the 3 places where we're most active. If you want to know more about us, the best way to stay up to date are our newsletters. So we have one weekly newsletter. Just go to making-stories.com and then scroll down to the bottom and you can sign up. If you are interested in the work that we do with designers, there's a special section in the footer, work with us and then designers. And then there is also a mailing list for designers where we publish calls for submissions and things like that. So yeah, that's where you can find us.
And if they're interested in the Making Stories Collective, where do they find it?
Oh, wonderful. Thank you so much for mentioning that. Again, making-stories.com, and in the navigation bar at the very top, there is a Making Stories Collective button. Just click on that, and then that will take you to the explanation page, and you can sign up for the collective there as well.
Perfect. Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me, Jessica. It was an absolute treat. Thank you.
Wow. Thanks so much for listening to this episode. If you found it valuable, please share the podcast with a designer friend. And if you have a minute, leave a review. It's so helpful for me and means the world to me. Chat soon.